Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. It's my birthday today, actually, my 50th, and I've been sort of quite, I struggled with my 30th. I thought that was really a step too far, and now I'm at 50. And it feels like I've gone even further, so I've been lying low, undercover. I thank Mr. and Mrs. Purva Sanghi for a lovely dinner on Saturday night. We were under the stars, a few drops of rain, but it didn't rain, so it was really very, very beautiful. Good company, and thank you. Macro thoughts: global GDP worse than official forecasts show. That's the Maersk CEO. We believe that global growth is slowing down, he said in a phone interview. Trade is currently significantly weaker than it normally would be under the growth forecasts we see. Eric Hansader tweeted this chart of 5 minutes currency trading 5 minutes after 5 seconds of trading in all active currency futures at 8:30 when the non-farm payrolls number was released on Friday. I like this painting by Mark Rothko, number 6, Sienna Orange on Wine Sauce Sotheby's. It was sold at auction, one of my favorites. Hannah Nishith and myself went to Kitengela Glass, which is deep in Kitengela, yesterday. And I'll put up a photograph of the glass blower. And they pick up all this sort of glass that's thrown away, and they make beautiful stuff. They're very good value. It's obviously marked up a great deal as it comes towards Nairobi. And at dinner at Mrs. Sanghi, I met Mr. Morales, who's the IMF representative, and he's from Peru, and I was telling him about how I was enjoying reading Mario Vargas Llosa, and the latest book I got was it's called The Storyteller, and it's about ethnology, the study of the tribes in the Amazon forests, and it's gripping. But let me read you one paragraph. The sort of decision arrived at by saints and madmen is not revealed in others. It's not revealed to others. It is forged little by little in the folds of the spirit, tangential to reason, shielded from indiscreet eyes, not seeking the approval of others who would never grant it, until it is at last put into practice. I imagine that in the process, the conceiving of a project and its ripening into action, the saint, the visionary, or the madman isolates himself more and more, walling himself up in solitude, safe from the intrusion of others. And the other book I'm reading is Paul Virilio, The Information Bomb. And this is a description of what he's writing about, and it can be a mouthful, but actually he's brilliant. Thus, the dominant code of globalization is not networking, nor the economic expansion of global corporations, nor the global reach of terrorism. Rather, it lies in the virtualization of the vision machine. This virtualization rests on the binary of the actual virtual, which splits the real, creating a reality effect. It is essential today for globalization to effect a split in primary reality by developing a stereo reality made up on the one hand of the actual reality of immediate appearances, and on the other of the virtual reality of media transappearances. Not until this new reality effect becomes generally accepted as commonplace will it be possible really to speak of globalization. The reality effect amplifies the optical densities into a transappearance, creating the bulging eye. While Virilio calls this the ushering in of the information bomb, it is far more aptly a light vector that explodes to escape the old vectors of the actual and the real. Enter then the virtual in the guise of the most prominent of the exploding orbs, as in the child's rhyme, Back to Mr. Golden Sun. Political reflections: Aung San Suu Kyi is expected to rule from above, but her party is expected to have a 70% landslide victory. We'll find that out in the coming sessions. US wants to avoid a second Cold War or hot war with Russia. This is Ash Carter, Defense Secretary. Carter, speaking at the Reagan National Defense Forum in California, said that Russia has been acting as a spoiler on the world stage, including violating the sovereignty of Ukraine, trying to intimidate Baltic countries and sending troops to Syria. We do not seek a cold, let alone a hot war with Russia, he said. We do not seek to make Russia an enemy. But make no mistake, the United States will defend our interests, our allies, the principled international order, and the positive future it affords us all. At sea, in the air, and in cyberspace, Carter said, Russia has engaged in challenging activities. The US and its allies are also concerned about the pace and scope of China's land reclamation in the South China Sea. He cited innovations such as the electromagnetic railgun, lasers, new systems for electronic warfare, go back to Paul Virilio, space and cyberspace. The US is also pursuing more old-fashioned methods of countering opponents. In Asia, the US is putting its best and newest assets and making heavy investments in subsurface warfare, electronic warfare, space, cyber, missile defense, and more, Carter said. The single most influential factor in shaping the region's future is how China rises and relates to the principled order that has undergirded regional peace, stability, and security. Now, what's interesting about this whole US-China standoff is that Reuters is reporting that the US patrol, USS Lassen, sought to avoid provocation, and in doing that reinforced China's island claim. We wanted to assert our rights under international law, but not to the point where we were poking the Chinese in the eye or where it would unnecessarily escalate the situation. The official said the destroyer USS Lassen turned off its fire control radars while transiting within 12 nautical miles of Subi Reef, and avoided any military operations during that time, including helicopter launches or other drills. Analysts said if the Lassen failed to take such actions or even loiter or collect intelligence within the zone, the operation would have resembled what is known as innocent passage, and could have reinforced rather than challenged China's claim to a territorial limit around the reef. Innocent passage occurs when one's country's ships quickly transits another's territorial waters and can only take place in waters belonging to another country. If the Lassen didn't do anything but transit, then this freedom of navigation operation didn't actually assert what they had led us to believe it was supposed to, that Subi Reef doesn't get a territorial sea. Interesting. So the question is, are they seriously pivoting, or is it a lot of theatre? Put up a photograph of the USS Lassen, also a photograph of the Taiwanese president meeting with the Chinese president, which is a historic meeting between formerly bitter Cold War foes. And I thought to myself, so much practice and consideration and fine-tuning must have gone into that pose on both sides. And I concluded by saying Xi Jinping has been on a recent diplomatic tour de force. Sources close to the investigation say the explosion could be heard on the black box recorder and rule out mechanical failure or crew error. I wrote in August 2014 that planes have been falling out of the sky like flies, and that the signal announcing this new arrhythmic normal was the disappearance of MH370. I quoted Don DeLillo, "We're not witnessing the flow of information so much as pure spectacle or information made sacred, ritually unreadable. The small monitors of the office, home and car become a kind of idolatry here where crowds might gather in astonishment." One of the conclusions around this whole talk about the no-fly zone in northern Syria is that the Russian president might have to deploy Russian special forces and armored divisions northward to discourage US and Turkish adventurism in this regard. Have a look at that link for that article on Rich Wrap-Ups, it's pretty interesting. Harjit Sajjan is among several Sikhs appointed to key positions in Trudeau's parity administration. I thought to myself, it's parity for women, but also the Sikhs seem to have got an overweight position. Adam Cathcart, How Kim Jong-un Sees the World. Narendra Modi, This photograph was taken at the India-Africa Forum Summit in Delhi last month, but his ruling Hindu nationalist BJP party lost a critical regional election in Bihar. Getting back to the markets, US non-farm payrolls blew through expectations, which had clustered around 180,000 new jobs for October, to clock 271,000. Interest rate futures jumped to pricing in a 70% probability that the US Central Bank will raise borrowing costs next month. US Treasury yields jumped off the payrolls report, with the 2-year marking its highest level in 5.5 years. Let me show you the move in the 2-year. This was tweeted by Jonathan Ferro. Let me show you a comparison. This is from Holger, Dow Jones versus the 10-year yield. And finally, you can see what happened with the dollar the moment that those numbers hit the screen. That's Jonathan Ferro. Again, moving on to the currency markets, let's take a look. When I looked last, the euro was around 107.68, touched 107.04 on Friday, which was a 7-month low. Dollar index around 99, the figure. Japanese yen 123.37 when I checked last. Let me quickly check now. 123.48. Swissy 1.0043. Pound 150.81. Aussie last trading at 0.7059 and touched 0.7016. India rupee 66.365. South Korean won 11.5546. Real 376.73. Egyptian pound 803, and people are getting very worried about that. You know why? South African rand 14.1562. Let me put up a 3-month chart of the dollar index. We're now pushing on here. Market expectations for a rate hike. My only worry about that is, December is a time of thin markets, and to raise rates at that time might not be the most sensible option. Euro, let me put up a chart that Holger tweeted last trading at 107.70. It's tumbled quite sharply since Draghi started talking about further easing. Gold, we're now trading at 10.94. Let me put up a 6-month chart. That stop loss was exactly the right level. Look how far and how deep we've dropped since then. Crude oil, $45.29. That's come off. Brent is at 48.31. You'll remember we popped above 51 at one point not too long ago. Emerging markets, Goldman's BRIC era ends as fund folds after years of losses. And then Shanghai Composite Index climbs 1.6%, reaching its highest level since August the 20th. Let's move on to Africa. Samantha Power waded in on the Burundi issue, expressed alarm about the dangerous, irresponsible rhetoric on the part of the government, loyalist militias, violent anti-government forces, and criminal elements. US is concerned the deadline to disarm will trigger widespread violence beginning this coming weekend. Firm and decisive diplomatic intervention at a minimum is required to prevent a civil war and its inevitable massacres, Brussels-based crisis troops said on Thursday. President Kagame told an audience in Kigali they should have learnt the lesson of our history. He was critical of Nkurunziza. No one knows where he is. No one can talk to him. How does he lead his people? People are dying every day. Dead bodies are being dragged on the streets every day. The UN Security Council will discuss Burundi today. That's according to France. Very interesting article about the Emirati armed forces having started to use actively Eritrean ports. And it's quite an interesting story. Have a look at it. Talking about how they want to use the port of Assab as a local logistics hub, how the Eritreans are supporting their effort in the Yemen. The Zambian Kwacha, which has halved in value against the dollar this year, slipped to 13.17 on Friday, the weakest level ever. And the currency isn't expected to recover soon. Kwacha remaining exceptionally fragile. Governments still far from enacting credible fiscal consolidation efforts. The risk of another leg of depreciation loom large. Zambia's debt ratio has soared as the currency has plunged. Total debt may reach 56% of GDP by the end of the year if the currency remains near current levels. It was 32.7% only in June. Kwacha is down 51% against the dollar. Put up an image of the Zambian Kwacha. Dollar goes from savior to scapegoat as Zimbabwe economy buckles. Zimbabwe's currency regime means its factories can't compete with their South African and Zambian counterparts because of the FX. According to Bisisa Moyo, more than 80 Zimbabwean businesses shut last year. Just 34% of the country's manufacturing capacity is being utilised. Very difficult situation there. South African all share is up 6.42% year to date, but fell 2.05% on Friday. The rand, of course, at an all-time low. Have a look at the 6-month chart. It's obviously headed lower. Sifiso Tabengwe, who was the CEO of MTN, has resigned. That's after the debacle in Nigeria. Terror attack or not, jet crash is a disaster for Egypt tourism. Egypt spent millions of dollars splashing images of its ancient pyramids and beach resorts over London buses and billboards in New York to boost its vital but ailing tourist industry. Foreign visitors have been put off by years of upheaval following the Arab Spring revolt. Saying now Russia has barred airlines from flying to Egypt. UK carriers have had to stop flights to Sharm el-Sheikh as both nations bring thousands of stranded travellers home. France has stopped flights. Netherlands and Germany have urged their citizens to stay away. The crash and subsequent travel warnings are a catastrophic development for Egypt. Metrojet disaster is a major blow to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. About 3 million Russians holidayed in Egypt in 2014, the most of any nation. Put up a photograph of tourists playing in the water at the Regency Plaza Resort on November the 5th in Sharm el-Sheikh. Beyond BRIC saying Egypt is on the brink of the tragic crash of Metrojet Flight 9268 in Sinai, killing 224 people, looks increasingly to be the result of foul play by ISIS. This has troubling implications for Egypt and the broader region and highlights key structural shifts in the war on terror. Saying that Egypt was on a road disturbingly similar to that of Algeria in the 1990s, where hundreds of thousands died in a civil war. They identified the Egyptian tourism sector, which makes up over 11% of GDP, as a prime target for ISIS. The Egyptian pound 803 probably going to get a little weaker. Egyptian EGX30 down 17.69% year to date. Nigerian all share down 15.82% year to date. Ghana Stock Exchange down 12.24% year to date. Magufuli, the president of Tanzania, has banned foreign trips for his ministers, ordering them to familiarise themselves with villages, saying embassies represent the country abroad. Bangkok versus Dar es Salaam, why sprawling cities are a concern for Africa's urban future. World Bank. My piece over the weekend is called Wow, What a Ride. Hunter S. Thompson was an American journalist come author and the founder of the gonzo journalism movement. He made pithy and luminous comments like, buy the ticket, take the ride. And life should not be a journey to the grave with the intention of arriving safely in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside in a cloud of smoke, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, wow, what a ride. The reason that Hunter Stockton Thompson came to mind was because it has felt like we entered a whole new Hunter S. Thompson portal. 1-year Treasury bills topped 23%, essentially repriced the entire borrowing curve. The shockwave of 1,000 basis point repricing across the country was no small thing, and in truth not sustainable. If we had a Kenyan VIX measure of future expectations of volatility gauge, maybe that's an innovation the capital markets might consider, it would have flown off the charts. Then we had the uncertainty around Imperial Bank, and you can imagine what everyone was thinking, given that the IMF's Kenya representative was saying, to come up with such magnitude of hidden operations by one relatively small bank is something very unusual. Normally when there is a problem you can see it in the financial indicators, but the financial indicators of Imperial Bank were all positive. They were even lending in the financial markets. A lot of investigation needs to take place to see what was happening. The first thing to understand and unravel is what actually happened. The government had forecast to borrow $221 billion this financial year from the domestic bond markets, an average of $55 billion every quarter. Ahead of this spike in 1-year Treasury bills, the government actually paid down $61 billion. The government got into a standoff with the markets and essentially created a negative swing of 116 billion shillings. It is this negative swing which then amplified the cash crunch. Of course, at this moment of maximum volatility, other cross-currents were in play. Imperial Bank fears created a deposit flight into Tier 1 banks, and without some quick thinking on the part of the central bank, they're now conducting reverse repo operations, means they're adding liquidity. There was a fear of a domino effect. By drawing down $600 million from international lenders, the government has now reversed a big slice of that negative swing. The past week, the central bank offered 182 and 364 treasury bills for a total of 8 billion. The total number of bids received was 348, amounting to 32.89 billion and 50.31 billion, respectively. Rates tumbled down. The weighted average came down to 16.492%, previous auction 21%, and 17.13%, previous auction 21.212%. More than 80 billion shillings was offered for 8 billion. I said we have challenges. We need to look at the current account deficit. We need to resize our plans from a previous go large to a better nuanced and sequenced plan. We need to pull President John Pombe Magufuli. He just cancelled all foreign travel. But in the immediate term, and after some stomach-churning turbulence, we have sight of a landing strip. It now behoves the banks to bring the interest rate down as quickly as they raised it. Go back to that quotation of Armando Morales: to come up with such magnitude of hidden operations by one relatively small bank is something very unusual. If you haven't seen my interview that I did with Bob Collymore after his really strong results, have a look. That link is on the website. The share price has jumped 5.244% in response to what were much stronger than expected earnings. KCB up 9.677% over 3 sessions. NSE Kenya up 31.7% this year and at a record high. Kenya shilling gone as high as 103.335 but last trading 102.50. Nairobi All Share is up 2.4% since November the 4th. NSE 20 up 1.13% since November the 3rd. We're hoping that the recovery can build a little bit as interest rates come lower. Once again, thank you for stopping by.